I had never heard my mother cry, not like this. I rushed to her, my heart pounding in my chest. She was standing by the sink, her back to me, her shoulders shaking with the force of her sobs. I didn't know what to say. Words felt useless, empty. She was crying for all the things she had never allowed herself to feel before, the overwhelming exhaustion, the fear of losing everything, the pressure to be perfect in a world that never gave her a break. I stood there, helpless, not knowing how to comfort her. She didn't ask for my help, didn't look to me for answers. But in that moment, I understood. My mother, the one who had always been so strong, so certain, was just as human as the rest of us. And in her vulnerability, I saw a side of her I had never known, one that I would come to realize was always there, hidden beneath the surface of the woman who had given everything for me. But she never stayed down for long. No matter how broken she seemed, no matter how dark the days got, she always found a way to pick herself up. And I learned to carry the weight of her struggle, not with resentment, but with a quiet understanding that her strength wasn't in never breaking, it was in getting back up, again and again, no matter how many times life knocked her down. All I had ever known was a mother who kept going, no matter how much it hurt. But now, I was faced with the reality that she was human, that her strength was not infinite, and that I was powerless to help her bear the weight she had been carrying alone for so long.
I don't know how to keep going, honey. I don't know how to do this anymore.
Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't dare let them fall. I had seen my mother cry before, but never like this, never with the weight of such profound defeat behind it. This wasn't just exhaustion. This wasn't just physical pain. This was something far deeper, a complete collapse of everything she had built up for us, everything she had protected me from. I knelt beside her, unsure of what to say or do. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but all I could do was sit there, silently, as she broke down in front of me. She buried her face in her hands, her sobs racking her body. I had never seen her so vulnerable, so exposed. For years, I had been the one to look to her for strength, but now, in this moment, I realized that it was I who needed to be strong for her. I had always assumed that I could protect her, that I could somehow take away the weight of everything she had endured. But I was wrong. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't make everything better. The realization hit me with a brutal force. My mother was a person, not a superhero. She had been carrying the world on her shoulders, but there was no one to carry her in return. The scene that followed remains one of the most intense and dramatic moments of my life. I tried to console her, to tell her everything would be okay, but the words felt empty. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She wasn't asking for solutions. She just needed to release the torrent of emotion that had been building inside her for so long. And so, we sat there together, in that quiet, suffocating space, as the storm of her emotions raged around us. The following days were a blur. My mother stopped going to work. She stopped pretending that everything was fine. The routine we had relied on for so long, the one that kept us going despite the odds, crumbled in an instant. She spent most of her days lying in bed, staring at the ceiling or watching the rain fall outside. I tried to fill the gaps, doing my best to keep the apartment in order, making small meals, and trying to make things feel normal. But nothing was normal anymore. There was one evening, a few days after her breakdown, when the reality of our situation became unbearable. It was nearing the end of the month, and the bills were piling up, with no way to pay them. I overheard her on the phone with a creditor, trying to explain that she didn't have the money, that she had nothing left to give. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the quiet apology she offered as she promised to send payment soon, knowing full well she wouldn't be able to. When she hung up, I walked into the kitchen, where she was standing with her back to me, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. Her hands were trembling as she held a half-empty cup of coffee, but she didn't turn around. She just stood there, staring out the window, her face drawn, exhausted.
I'm sorry, honey.
She said, her voice low, barely audible.
I thought I could protect you from all of this, but I can't anymore.
In that moment, I realized how much she had kept from me, how much she had shielded me from the harshness of our reality. I had seen the signs of her struggle, but I hadn't fully understood the depth of it, the mental, emotional, and physical toll it had taken on her. It was then that I knew I had to step up, that I had to be the one to carry us both through this. I couldn't wait for her to get better. I couldn't wait for the magic fix. I had to find a way to survive too, even if that meant taking on a weight that was far heavier than I had ever imagined. But my mother wasn't ready to give up just yet. Though she was broken, though she had come to the edge of herself, she still found a way to fight. It wasn't with grand gestures or declarations. It was in the small moments, the quiet resolve in her eyes when she finally decided to go back to work, to push through one more day, to try again. And in those moments, I saw a glimpse of the woman she had always been. Not invincible, not unbreakable, but strong in a way that I could never have imagined. A strength forged through years of hardship, a strength that could withstand even the deepest cracks. But I also saw the toll that strength had taken. And it terrified me, because I knew now that even the strongest person could break. And I didn't know how long either of us could keep going. The final chapter of my mother's struggle, and the most heart-wrenching of them all, was not defined by a single moment of crisis, but by the gradual, inevitable unraveling of everything we had fought so hard to preserve. This was the part of the story where hope seemed like a distant memory, where survival no longer felt like a victory, but an endless endurance test with no finish line in sight. It started one morning when I woke to find her gone, no note, no explanation, nothing. I thought it was just another one of her long shifts or a quiet escape into the world she often retreated to when things became too much. But as hours passed, I grew more concerned. The sun began to set, and still, there was no sign of her. I tried calling her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. I felt that knot of fear slowly tightening in my chest. When she finally came through the door late that night, I could see it in her eyes, the telltale signs that something had shifted, something had broken that could not be fixed. She walked into the apartment like a ghost, her movements slow and mechanical, as though each step took monumental effort. Her face was drawn and pale, her clothes disheveled, as though she had been running on autopilot for days.
"I'm sorry,"
she whispered, as though apologizing for something I couldn't fully grasp. But her voice carried a weight of guilt that made me uneasy. There was something more to this apology, something buried under layers of exhaustion, frustration, and perhaps even a sense of resignation. I didn't press her for answers, not at first. I just tried to be there, to support her as best I could, but the air between us had changed. The comfortable silence we once shared had been replaced by an awkward distance, a chasm that neither of us could bridge. And deep down, I realized we were no longer just two people trying to survive. We were two people lost in a battle that neither of us could win alone. Then, came the night that would forever mark the turning point in our lives, the night when my mother collapsed. I had come home to find her sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, her face ashen. She hadn't heard me come in, her eyes were closed, and she was muttering softly to herself, as though trying to make sense of a world that no longer made sense to her. I rushed to her side, panic surging through me as I knelt beside her. Her skin felt cold to the touch, her breath shallow. I shook her gently, calling her name, but it was as if she were in a trance, locked inside a place I couldn't reach. Fear gripped me like a vice, and I immediately dialed for an ambulance. The seconds stretched into hours as I waited, helpless, for the paramedics to arrive. When they finally took her to the hospital, I was left alone in the empty apartment, the silence louder than ever. I sat there, staring at the empty space where my mother had once sat, her strength and resolve a distant memory. The phone call from the hospital later confirmed what I had feared. She had suffered a breakdown, a complete mental and emotional collapse. The years of unrelenting stress had finally taken their toll. She was admitted for treatment, but the doctors weren't sure what her recovery would look like. It was clear that this was no longer a simple matter of physical fatigue. My mother's mental health had shattered under the weight of everything she had carried. What followed was a period of confusion and heartbreak. My mother, the woman who had always been my rock, was now a stranger. I would visit her every day, watching as she sat in silence in her hospital room, her gaze vacant, her mind lost in a fog of medication and trauma. The doctors told me it was going to take time, that the road to recovery would be long and uncertain. But I wasn't sure I could keep waiting. I wasn't sure I could keep fighting for something I wasn't sure was ever coming back. Then came the night she finally spoke to me again, her voice weak and trembling, like she was testing the waters after a long, painful silence.
"I'm sorry for everything.
She said, her eyes brimming with tears.
I never wanted this for you."
I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the sense of finality in her words. She wasn't just apologizing for the breakdown, she was apologizing for everything, the sacrifices she had made, the way she had shielded me from the harshest truths of our life, the way she had forced herself to be everything to everyone, even when she didn't have anything left to give. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Mom, you don't need to apologize. I'm just glad you're still here." But inside, I felt a deep, aching sadness. I wasn't just glad she was there, I was scared. Scared that the woman who had always been strong, who had fought so fiercely to protect me, was slipping away. Scared that I was about to lose the only constant I had ever known. Days turned into weeks, and each day was a blur of hospital visits, doctor's appointments, and endless uncertainty. I watched my mother slowly begin to recover, but the woman who returned was not the same. She was quieter, more withdrawn, her fire dimmed by the weight of her years of struggle. She had lost the strength that had once seemed unbreakable, replaced by a fragility that haunted me. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, my mother and I sat together in the small hospital room, the sterile smell of disinfectant mingling with the faint scent of flowers from a vase on the windowsill. She looked at me with a mixture of sorrow and something I couldn't quite place, regret, perhaps, or a deep weariness.
"I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to carry this burden. I should have let you in sooner."
I shook my head, my heart heavy with the weight of her words. "You did the best you could. You always did." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't enough. My mother had given everything for me, but it had come at the cost of herself. The cost of her health, her happiness, her very soul. And as I looked at her in that moment, I realized that I would carry the weight of that knowledge for the rest of my life. The following months were a slow, painful recovery. My mother began to regain some semblance of normalcy, but she was never the same. Her laughter, which had once been so full of life, was now quieter, more reserved. The fierce independence that had defined her was now tempered by the understanding that she was fragile, human, and that the world wasn't as simple as she had once believed. In time, I learned that the true cost of survival wasn't just the physical toll, it was the emotional and mental scars that no one could see. The years of unspoken struggles, the hidden wounds that had festered beneath the surface, and the constant, gnawing fear of failure had all taken a permanent toll on her. And though we both tried to rebuild, the truth remained, there were no real winners in this story. We had survived, yes, but at what cost? In the end, I realized that it wasn't just my mother who had changed, it was both of us. We had been irrevocably shaped by the years of hardship and the trials we had faced together. But despite everything, we still had each other. And in that, there was a fragile hope. The final reckoning wasn't the end of our story, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where we both had to learn how to heal, how to rebuild, and how to forgive not only each other, but ourselves. But even as I stood on the threshold of that uncertain future, I knew one thing for sure, the battle had been long, and the scars would remain. But the love between us, despite everything, would endure.